All right, instructors, buckle up, because today we're going to take a deep dive into CDL driver safety.
That's right. We're diving into a guide designed for your students, those future truckers out there.
We're going to unpack some essential tips and tricks to help you instructors really drive those safety lessons home.
It's about making sure those lessons stick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to tell someone to follow the rules, but helping them understand the why behind those rules. That's where the magic happens.
Absolutely.
So let's kick things off with communication.
Okay.
Imagine this for a second. You're cruising down the highway behind this massive truck, right?
Okay.
And suddenly it swerves into your lane without a peep, no signal, nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Makes your heart skip a beat, right?
It does, because communication is really key, especially when you're dealing with a vehicle that size.
Absolutely.
You know, those signals, they need to be crystal clear.
For sure. For sure.
And our source actually recommends a solid 3 to 5 seconds of signaling before making any moves.
Wow.
Yeah, that might seem like an eternity in a car, but in a truck, trust me, it's the difference between a smooth maneuver and a potential disaster.
Right. It's like giving everyone around you a heads up, a chance to react and adjust.
Exactly.
So now let's shift gears to visibility.
Okay.
This guide really emphasizes the importance of maintaining a safe following distance.
And for good reason. You know, the weight and momentum of a fully loaded truck, it's in a whole other league compared to a car.
It's true.
That's why they recommend a 4 to 6 second following distance for trucks,
Wow.
as opposed to that 2-second rule we usually hear about for cars.
I never realized there was such a difference.
Oh yeah, it makes a huge difference.
So if you're driving a truck at highway speed, that's like, what, the length of a football field to come to a complete stop.
At least, yeah, you need that space.
Wow, that really puts things into perspective.
It does. And that kind of brings us to anticipating hazards, you know? Truck drivers with their high vantage point, they have an advantage. Like, they can see the entire road ahead of them.
It's true, they can see those brake lights from a mile away. But how far ahead should they really be looking?
Well, the guide recommends at least 12 to 15 seconds ahead on the road, which at highway speed, that's practically a football field.
Wow.
It's all about training your eyes to spot those hazards early on, like a sudden slowdown or debris in the road.
So that's where the instructors come in, right?
Exactly.
You're not just teaching students to drive a truck, you're teaching them to, like, read the road,
Absolutely.
to anticipate what's coming next.
This is where those practical exercises are really important. You know, encourage your students to identify potential hazards from a distance.
Right.
Simulate different scenarios and coach them on the right responses.
Yeah.
It's all about turning those reactive instincts into proactive habits.
Okay, so speaking of proactive habits, let's talk about blind spots.
Yeah.
Or as our source calls them, no zones.
Yeah.
Those sneaky areas around a truck where other vehicles can just vanish
Yeah, disappear.
from a driver's view.
Yeah, and they're a huge factor in a lot of truck-related accidents.
Right.
The physics behind it is pretty simple. It's the driver's position, the length of the trailer, all contribute to these blind spots.
It's like trying to see through a brick wall.
Basically.
And our source really emphasizes that for car drivers especially, that front nose zone.
Yeah.
Stay clear unless you can literally see the truck driver's face in the side mirror.
That's a great rule of thumb.
Right. Because if they can't see you, you're in trouble.
Exactly.
Now, what about those side nose zones?
Yes.
Those seem even trickier, especially on the right side where the blind spot is even bigger.
You're right, those are really dangerous. Truck drivers have to be super vigilant checking their mirrors constantly,
Right.
especially when changing lanes.
And our source recommends actually leaning forward for a better view before making any moves.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's how crucial those blind spots are.
It's serious stuff.
And then there's the rear nose zone, which is a whole other story.
Oh yeah.
You do not want to be tailgating a truck
Nope.
because those rear blind spots are no joke.
It's so important to keep a safe distance.
So instructors, how do you really drill this blind spot awareness into your students' heads?
One of the best ways is to actually physically demonstrate the no zones. Have them walk around a parked truck so they can really see those blind spots from different angles.
That's a great idea.
It's one thing to read about it, but to actually experience it firsthand is a game changer.
I bet some students would be shocked by how big those no zones actually are.
Oh, for sure.
Now, while we're on the topic of visibility, our source also mentioned some less obvious things that can impact a driver's ability to see clearly.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like, I don't know if you've heard this one, but using low beams in foggy or rainy conditions can actually be better than high beams.
Really?
Yeah, apparently high beams can create too much glare, making it harder to see.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's all about adapting to those conditions. It's amazing, right? All the things you got to think about when you're behind the wheel of a truck.
Yeah, you really got to be on top of your game.
And speaking of things we might not always think about, our guide also mentions managing those interior lights, especially at night.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. We talk a lot about the outside, but the inside of the cabin can have distractions too.
It's true. A bright dashboard or even your phone can really mess with your night vision.
Exactly. You got to minimize those distractions and focus on the road.
And that brings us to a really important point. I think communication visibility, hazard anticipation. None of it really matters if the driver isn't alert and focused.
You're absolutely right. You can have all the fancy tech and safety features in the world, but a well-rested and attentive driver, that's your #1 safety feature.
That's so true. It all comes back to those good habits behind the wheel and outside of the truck, too.
Yeah, taking care of yourself so you can take care of business.
And instructors, you play a huge role in that. You're not just teaching them to drive, you're shaping responsible drivers.
It's about creating safer roads for everyone.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like we've reached the end of our deep dive on CDL driver safety.
This was great.
We covered a ton of ground today, from communication to blind spots to anticipating hazards,
We really got into the why behind all these safety rules.
and hopefully gave you instructors some practical tips to share with your students.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, it's about understanding why these rules exist. It's about keeping everyone safe out there on the road.
Well said. So as you head back out there to train those future truckers, we'll leave you with this. How can we create a culture of safety on the road? Not just for truck drivers, but for all of us.
It's something to think about.
Keep those wheels turning, instructors, and keep up the amazing work.